Hey there, welcome back to the Branding Laboratory. I am your host, Deevo, and today's episode is one I've been looking forward to for a couple of weeks since I saw it scheduled. I often talk about the intersection of who we are as humans and who we are as professionals shape not just our success, but the kind of legacy that we want to leave behind. And that's why I'm really thrilled about today's show with Kara Chafin Donofrio. Sorry, I had to look at my notes to make sure I didn't mess up that name. She's going to join us today and talk a little bit about navigating the high pressure world of real estate and entrepreneurship and how she's come out on the other side, not with just success, but clarity, grace, and a soul centered approach to life and business, which really intersects a lot with what I'm talking about in my world. What really drew me to her story is her ability to take what so many of us struggle on a regular basis with as entrepreneurs, the hustle, the grind, and the endless pursuit of more, and reimagine it as something more aligned, something more intentional, and dare I say, magical, which is the word she uses. So today we're going to dive into her journey from burnout to breakthrough and her unique ability to bridge logic and intuition, which I'm really big on, and the philosophies that guide her work with her clients and her team. And by the end of the conversation, it's my hope that you'll walk away with some really powerful insights on redefining success and reconnecting with your purpose and integrating your personal values into your professional life, which I believe is the crux and the backbone of success. So stay tuned because you're not going to want to miss a moment of this conversation with Kara. And hey, before we jump in, don't forget to follow the show, like the show, comment, and share this episode with someone who needs a little inspiration today. Your engagement helps me bring incredible stories like Kara's to life to more listeners just like you. So, Kara, welcome to the Branding Laboratory. Let's dive in. Are you ready to get real with me? A lot of Sorry, let me get that going. There's actually a lot of different ways other than just photo and video to tell your story. So it's all about your brand message, right? Which I think you figured a lot of that out already. But
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
most entrepreneurs struggle with that, the ability to tell their story. I
yeah,
think so many people get caught up in this idea of I'm being vain, I'm being narcissistic, like why would anybody care about what I have to say? And and I don't know if that's because of social media. Well, actually, it probably definitely has something to do with social media, but for
yeah,
whatever reason, we've been taught to not share that side of our world with other people for whatever
yeah.
reason. I don't really know why, but anyhow, so cool.
I think there's just like a fear. I struggled with it actually when I started even the podcast, which is separate from the real estate business, because it was like a more personal side. It's, oh, I'm going to show up as the business person, the real estate person. But then it was like, but I've had this whole other side that actually the soul side is something that I've been infusing into my business for, and it's helped me be, successful for the past 20 years. So why wouldn't I speak of more things that are really I'm passionate about because it allowed you to connect on a deeper level with people. And also, I think like one of the things that I think as a society, we're more skeptical of people that we can't read. There's this energy shift, I think, in the world and so the people that are showing up authentically, it's one of the reasons Gary Vee has been so successful because he is who he is. And so there's you know what you're getting. And
Hmm.
so I think that people authenticity, is 4,000 times more, is the highest frequency. It's higher than love.
Hmm.
So what's interesting about that is I think that it really does speak to how you show up, like showing up as your authentic self. It's not necessarily in all the political stuff, depending on where you are. Like as a business owner, you have to be somewhat not divisive necessarily, but I think that it just gives power to the fact that when you show up authentically as yourself, you have the ability to create bigger impact in the world
I
and for
don't
the client.
disagree with anything you just said, but I want to go back to one thing you did just say authenticity on a higher frequency than love. Really? Is that factually true? Or is authenticity part of love?
What I have read, there's actually a study done, and I'll find this study. I can't recall it off the top of my head now, but yes, they measured levels of energetic frequency, and it was measured that authenticity is actually higher than love, which is really fascinating.
Hmm. So they're measuring that on what? Frequency modulations like hertzes?
Yes, yes.
I'm going to challenge you on that one. And I'm going to do some research
Okay.
on that one because I've never heard that. And that doesn't mean it isn't true, but I've always understood that love is like literally the pinnacle of all energy levels. And I'm
Yeah,
wondering if authenticity, if you're showing up in kindness and authenticity, if those aren't all just part of metrics of love itself, I'm wondering.
possibly. In this
Hmm.
study, like I said, it was measured to be higher, but I don't know exactly how they were measuring it. But to your point, potentially you love is part of that, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's up there.
Yeah.
But anyway, in
I'm
terms of
going to
how
do
they're
some
measuring
research on that. And I'm going to get back to you on that one because
it. Okay.
I'm actually fascinated by frequencies. I
Yeah.
actually, when I'm here working by myself, I have my music going on and I'm using solfeggio. Have you heard of solfeggio? Solfeggio? I don't even know how you say it. Solfegio.
No.
It's the frequencies that they've actually put audio amplifiers or receptors up in space, like in space to like capture what the sound makes. And then
Oh,
they've actually been able to capture what sounds like forests make and planets, like the planet itself has a frequency and a sound that it makes. And it's imperceptible to us in the sense of we don't just like hear a sound. But when
right.
they, like I was watching the show and I'm going somewhere, they literally like connected trees to these music amplifiers and they can record the noises that trees make that were imperceptible to us. And they all operate on these frequencies called solfeggio frequencies. And yeah,
Interesting.
so you can go on Spotify and you can actually download solfeggio frequencies. And so 432 is like the ultimate love frequency. That's 432 hertz. I believe 524 is like a kindness hertz. Anyhow, but
Yeah.
I play these in the background, so I'm fascinated by this whole concept of music and the sound of it. Here's a fun fact for
Yeah.
you.
And
Did you-
sound healing. Like, have you
Yeah,
the sound bowls? So I actually
yeah,
meditate to those, like on YouTube, they have like different sound healing,
yeah, yeah,
type
yeah,
bowls. And it's all at like different energetic frequencies to your point, right?
yeah.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, I actually, we're all over the place. We better get on
I
target
know.
here. But I actually went to a retreat a few weeks ago. I guess it was about a month ago now. And I met this woman who every morning it was on the beach, and every morning she would set up her singing bowls on the
Hmm.
beach, and she would start off with singing bowls and then a meditation, and then she would do yoga on the beach. And so I wake up really early, and so I always just go down to the beach and read and do those sorts of things. And she was down there, so I just went up to her. Anyway, so I joined her every morning, and she was doing the singing bowls every morning, and she was like playing around the music right before we started
Wow.
the yoga, and
Yeah.
then yeah, it was just phenomenal. So I love that you do that.
Yeah,
Um,
it does put you into, again, I think energy is everything.
mhm,
And the more we understand that, I think our understanding is actually the fact that we're even having this conversation, right? Has like as a world, as a society, I think our energetic frequency has been rising and is
absolutely,
rising. And
absolutely,
so now we're able to understand and actually openly talk more about these concepts where 10 years ago it was, you're so woo. Now it's
absolutely.
like, our understanding of it is no, actually there's science behind this and
Hmm.
we're not just making it up. And then and then we can get started, but there's also a really fascinating, I read this and I can't remember where I read it, but it was about the trees and how they communicate with each other within their root system.
Yeah.
And so there was like trees that know that one is dying, they'll
Hmm.
actually take their nutrients back and then redistribute it because they
Yeah.
know. And then also, like when trees are sick, like they communicate. And so it gives power to this idea that if that's how trees operate, and we're not trees, but we're at a different level and we have this capacity too. And we are always communicating and sending out messages for what we need. And based on our belief system, we get that back. And so then it challenges us to like, how are we showing up and how can we clean our energy so that we can show up and make bigger impact in the lives of our clients, in the world, and all of that. So anyway, yeah.
I love all those things you said. So one of the things that I'm always talking about over here is this idea, and we're going to talk a little bit about this today. And the show sort of centers around this is the intersection of our personal lives and our professional lives and how the two are intertwined. And I think a lot of times people want to put them in silos. But how you show up as an individual is obviously how you're going to show up as a CEO or a leader of your business, no matter what you say. Like you can put them in whatever silos you want. But if you're fucked up and you have a bad nature and you have a bad self-awareness and you're not a good human, that's going to show up in your business no matter what you say. Like at some point it's going to manifest. So it's really important. One of the programs I do is teaching individuals how to work on themselves first so that they can show up better in their business lives. And so I love all the things you're saying, but one of the things before I forget, there's a show that I watch. I've actually watched it multiple times and you'll love this if you've never seen it. It's called Borealis.
Oh,
Like the Borealis,
yeah.
so it's based upon the Borealis forest, which is in like the northernmost part of Canada. And
Uh-huh.
I'm forgetting some of the metrics here, but like for 10 years, these scientists basically lived in the Borealis forest and they recorded and documented everything that went on for 10 years. And one of the things that they did is they were able to record the sound frequencies of the trees and watch the modulations over time of how the trees actually dictate not only the weather, but like the fire, for example. The trees literally are the ones that are triggering the fires to happen in the environment because overgrowth or they have disease. It's fascinating. I won't ruin it for you because it's literally one of the most phenomenal nature shows I've ever watched. And
Yeah.
just the symbiosis of everything from the silly to the mushrooms to the fungus to the plant life to the flora to the fauna and how all of them are like working in this synchronicity to control everything and
Wow.
yeah, and like they communicate with each other, they talk to each other. Like it blew my mind away. And the data they have is it's like insurmountable data. It's like you can't be like, oh, that's just fake stuff. Someone just made it up because it's really not. So I love to hear you
Right.
said that.
Oh, amazing. Oh, I can't wait to check it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I think it's on I don't know if it's on Netflix. I think I saw it on like Prime, I believe, a long time ago.
Okay.
I
Try to
bought
find
it,
it.
so it's like in my queue. So I actually regularly watch it every few months just because it's so fascinating.
Oh, cool. I can't wait. That's up my alley as well.
Yeah,
I
I'm a
love
nerd. I'm a nerd like that, so I love that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So let's just start off with there. First of all, Kara, am I saying the last name Chafin? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's Chafin Donofrio. So,
Chafin Donofrio. So you
yeah,
were
pretty well said.
formerly a Chafin, now you're Donofrio? Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm always fascinated by that, like why people change names, why they're supposed to change names, why you chose not to change a name. So, is there a reason that you were a celebrity before as Chafin, and then D'Onofrio is your new mate, your married name? Like, why do people do that? What's
Yeah,
this?
why? It's funny. So I actually professionally, I met my husband when I've been in real estate since I got out of college, right? So I was in my early 20s and had started in my professional life as Kara Chafin. And so then when I met my husband, I was about 31. We got married when I was about 33. So I'd already been in the business in the professional world. And so I didn't want to lose the name that people knew me by. But I also wanted to have the same name as my kids. And I guess I could have just not professionally gone by Donofrio, but I decided to. So it does make for a longer, we're like, what?
Yeah,
So
when I was doing your introduction before you when you were in the waiting room, I was wait, that's a long name. I got to get that
I know.
right. So I
So
probably
if you
should have
just say
checked with you first.
KCD, that's where KCD came along. It's a little actually one of my former brokers, he just used to call me KCD. What are you doing? So I
Hey,
was like,
give
all
me
right,
1 second before you continue. One of my lights is just fluttering over here, so just give me one
sure.
second. I'm going to pause this so it's not like
Yeah, no
weird
problem.
and roll back in. So let's just start off with that. Kara Chafin D'Onofrio, welcome to the podcast. I already did your introduction, so I'm not going to bore you with all those. I said all kinds of nice things about you, so don't disappoint me during the show today. We open up the conversation talking about this whole idea of spirituality and woo and connectivity and symbiosis and sort of this idea around soul essence and how I believe that your personal life and your professional life are directly intertwined, and how you show up in one is how you show up in the other. And you clearly share some of those same sentiments with me. Were you always this way? So let's talk a little bit about your origin story. Did you grow up with parents that were hippies? What's the space? Because you don't often meet people. I know there is like an insurgence. You can see it happening all across the planet, and people are more receptive to this. But it's not like you every day you're able to have a conversation with somebody and talk about the borealis trees and the way they communicate with each other. So you
Yeah.
obviously have some sort of self-awareness around this. Was this always the case, or was this like a matriculation? Did something happen that you were like, holy shit, life is different than I was told? What's the story behind that?
I know it's funny. I've always been like the woo friend forever and ever. But really, I grew up with parents that were my dad was in the military and very not woo, I would say. My mom, Catholic, grew up Catholic. But I'd say, so my parents actually divorced when I was in high school, and I had a really not great high school experience, and there was a lot of bullying, and I was just always felt very alone. So I
Mm,
think what that did is it like propelled me into this seeker phase, I would say, at a more earlier age, like 15, 16, 17, where I was seeking out different like healing modalities
You
and
said this as a teenager you were doing this?
yeah.
What was the first thing I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to get to the origin on that. So who brought this to you, this idea that there was something else out there than what you had been told?
It's funny. I don't recall. I know I met a psychic healer somewhere when I was around like 17. I can't even remember what her name was now, but she turned me on to like Abraham and Esther Hicks, like their
Mm.
work on law of attraction and then Wayne Dyer, I started like listening to a lot of his work. Deepak, I also was like a big Oprah. I watched Oprah when I came home from school. And so she had a lot of Deepak on there. And so I started just reading. Like I would just get these books and I just started this like journey, I would say at that age. And then it continued into college. Again, I did have an eating disorder in college and was had some struggle with some depression. And so I think some of those experiences just prompted me on this more like healing path to understand what was really going on and how some of these patterns exist for us and how can I move beyond these patterns. I remember going to a healing workshop when I was like 24 or 25. I was the youngest person in there. I think the next closest person was like into my age was maybe like 50 or 60, 50, 50s probably. And I was like 20. And so I just always sought out these kind of different experiences to have a better understanding of like, how does the world really work? If I'm learning about energy and frequency and what we put out in our belief systems and how they impact what shows up in our world, like that was just, I listened to a lot of books on at that point. I don't even know if they were on tape or on CD, but like it was, so that was, or downloaded them on MP3 back earlier on back, I guess, in like the 2000s. So yeah, so that's always been part of me, but quite frankly, it was always a part of me that felt quite hidden. And I remember at one point, did you ever hear the Artist's Way? Have you ever heard of that book or
Yeah,
done any of
yeah.
that?
I have
Yeah.
it I have it sitting behind me. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did that. And I was on this kind of, I did a lot of journaling, a lot of just self-reflection. But I always did it where I'd meditate, but I was always afraid of people to see me meditating. I wouldn't necessarily, like when I was at home and I was with my parents in a very like Catholic upbringing, I wouldn't tell them I was going to my room to meditate. It just felt, even with my husband, when we first were getting together, like I almost kept it a little bit of a secret, which is
Mm.
funny.
Yeah.
But it felt okay. I'm in this like professional world. I was a business major, majored in global finance, ended up in real estate. And it was something that always felt like there's the business world and then there's the spiritual world
Yeah.
and the spiritual path. And they felt very separate. And really, it wasn't until around maybe like 2019, 2018, 19, I was in this coaching session with my business coach, and I was talking about these separate worlds, and I was like, I really want to share these with the world because I've been actively practicing a lot of this stuff, which has actually really been helping me in business. But I feel like it's the secret world. Like I'm
Mm.
not sharing it more openly with people. And so that was actually the evolution of the Soul Inspiring Business podcast, really was this idea that in reality, what could be more spiritual than showing up in your business as your authentic self, as the person you were born to be, as sharing like the soul gifts that you have with the world? That is part of responsible business.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
it's fascinating that you discovered that early on. I have similar parallels to you, but I'm certainly not as enlightened as a teenager. I grew up with a very staunch conservative father as well. Religion was part of it. It was a bastardized version of religion, even in the sense of that. But I didn't really uncover that there was another side of the world until really after my divorce in teen. I started questioning this whole idea of this narrative that I'd been living by. And
mhm,
I had never really had anything fail before in my life up until that point in terms of like my business success or my athletic career or anything like that. And then suddenly that failed and I was like, okay, something here just doesn't add up. And it was books. And by the way, about that same time, that's funny you said Abraham and Esther. I got turned on to them as well. The most randomest thing occurred. True story. I was at the YMCA working out at my gym. and I was just scrolling through my YouTube. Dude, you know that passage from Buddha? It says like when the student is ready, the messenger arrives. Have you heard
Oh,
this?
yeah.
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 So I was just scrolling through YouTube because that's what I listen to when I'm in the gym. I listen to podcasts or like just shows. And this
Uh-huh.
Abraham Esther thing had popped into my queue. Never before had I ever heard of the law of abundance or manifestations. It never even concept never even been, had ever been discussed. And so I listened
Right.
to it, and that was the first time I had ever heard her. So I went out and bought a bunch of her books. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
crazy, like the books or their books, and yeah, so I got turned on at the same time. And Wayne
Yeah.
Dyer, one of my favorite actually, he did the Tao Te Ching. Are you familiar with that? The Tao. Well, if
No.
you like Wayne Dyer, you got to buy this, or Wayne Dyer, you got to buy this book. So he took the Tao Te Ching, which is, I think it's spelled Tao. It's a nobody actually knows if he was real or not real, but it's a book that was written almost 2000 before the Bible ever existed.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's passages of just living your best life, like the whole idea of flowing like water, for example. It's a Taoist principle. So
Mm.
Taoism is like a,
Oh,
it's a,
yeah. I,
yeah,
yeah, I have heard of, because there isn't there something like the Tao Ching or something like that as
That's
well that,
that's
yeah.
what I'm saying. I might be
Yeah. Yeah.
saying it
Yeah.
wrong. The
Okay.
Tao Te Ching,
Yeah.
I think, is how it's called. But Wayne
Yeah.
Dyer took that book and he reinterpreted it for the modern age because
Oh,
it's really complex reading. So like
right.
to read it, you have to really sit with it for a while and reread it because it's not written in like common speak like we talk.
Hmm.
And so he
Right.
took it and he took each of the passages, interpreted them for us, and then rewrote them. You'd love it. It's a phenomenal book.
Oh, yeah. I'll have to look that up. So, oh,
So cool.
awesome.
We have a lot of parallels that we can really dive into. So let's just talk about a few of the things. This whole idea that I love that you talked about is the hustle isn't sustainable. And I'm assuming this ideology came from your awakening, if you will, of understanding that there's a different side and a different way of living your life.
Yeah.
This idea of hustle not being sustainable. What's the intersection between hustling because you have to hustle. You're an entrepreneur. That is the name of the game for us. So how
Yeah.
do you balance the two so that it doesn't become overkill or overwhelm?
Yeah. I think it's an interesting balance for us all. And in
Yeah.
fairness, I'm still learning it. I think,
I don't believe I have learned it yet, actually. I sometimes find myself filling my voids with work because I'm like, shit, should I be doing something else? Is there something else I should be handling right now? Is like, am I missing out on something? Should I be making more money over here? Should I be like, whatever it is? Like I'm that constant, like in that space. I always have to remind myself, bro, take a beat,
yeah,
step back.
yeah. It's like the entrepreneurial blessing and curse when you're wired that way. But I think for me, it was interesting because even knowing all of this from a very and having this understanding, I was really getting burnout. And actually, how it showed up was so I'd been in real estate since 2004. Then I'd been approached in 2013, I guess it was, to lead several real estate offices. And it was around the time that I was having my babies. And I thought, oh, great, I'll actually take over this role. It'll help me because on the real estate side, when I was working kind of solo, I felt like I was always hustling. So even though I had this understanding of the flow side, it wasn't really a balance. So then I took over this managing broker role. And it was even worse. It was like amplified to the point where I felt extremely burnout. I felt like I was working longer hours. I wasn't even home for my babies as much as I thought I would be. And really, actually, I that's when I met my business coach now. Her name is Jen Cudmore. She's amazing. And her background is kinesiology. So she
Mm.
has this interesting intersect of like also understanding energy, but also working with these high level entrepreneurs. And really, and it was a very big leap of faith when I like decided to work with her. And she helped me really understand or put together all that I had learned in how do we show up. And I started then more practicing this idea of leaning into the idea that of things can show up with more grace and ease. We don't have to push everything so much. But I think part of it is leaning into your soul gifts. So part of it is when you are really operating from all the things that are natural to you, the things that are God given, that when you're really leaning in and doing the work from that place, it doesn't, sometimes you may be working harder, that like harder from society's perception, but the work it feels like it flows a little easier because it's just naturally who you are. And then I think there's also a conscious piece of it where we have to, and this is, I think, where having some type of like morning routine or leaning into like affirmations or mindset can really help, where you can say, listen, I don't have to do this all on my own. I can ask for help. I can trust that when I'm aligned in who I'm meant to be and what I'm doing in the world, my truest job is actually to show up, making a difference and impact in the clients that I'm serving. And I'm just going to trust that God, the universe, will just deliver the right people to me at the right time and it can flow easier. So I think there's a
Is
belief system to it.
Sorry, let me stop you there because there's a lot of
Mhm.
things you said that I have to unpack. And forgive me
Sure.
throughout the show. I'm going to do that just because
No, all good.
I'm not going to be able to remember everything that you say. God, universe. When you say God, a lot of people like draw back.
Hmm.
Do you mean in the sense of the God of like Christianity, the Bible, or God of the creator of all things, the universe, something bigger than you?
For
What do you personally believe?
I believe it's like God, the creator of all things, but I call it God.
On
Some people have different labels. It's like calling a tomato.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
understood.
anyway,
I,
so
I
that is
refer
it
to
for
it as
me.
the divine source. That's the name I've come up with for it, just the
Hmm.
divine source, just because I don't like the name God. It's very empirical sounding to me. So
Yeah.
that's my personal preference. All right. So this
Yeah.
idea of finding your magic, because you use the word magic a lot. And
Hmm.
what I'm assuming you mean by that is your idea of success or your idea of being fulfilled is A, understanding what value you bring to the world, first and
Hmm.
foremost, and then
Yes.
stepping into that because the magic happens when you're truly living your purpose, when you're truly stepping into the things that make you fulfilled, the things that make you happy. And work doesn't necessarily become work in the sense of, I'm just exhausted. I have to go to work today, like most people feel. It's still
Yeah.
a lot of work. You're still putting in the hours, you're still putting in the energy, you're still hustling, but it doesn't feel that way because you're fulfilled in the sense like you're living in harmony almost. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes. I think
Okay.
that is it. That's part of it. And then I think the other part is just a conscious choice that things can show up more easily for you. And when I say choice, I almost mean you have to consciously choose that things don't have to be hard for you. Because so many of us were grow up with this belief that's instilled in us from our parents that work is hard. It really is very hard to make money. These are all like beliefs that we were taught from a very early age.
Or
But
scarcity.
scarcity, exactly.
I
Yes.
was taught scarcity and I never knew that. Truly,
Yes.
like my dad used to tell me that money was like the evil of all evils and that wealthy people were bastards and that anybody who was wealthy was like a bad person and like money is just awful. And I always, my dad was poor and I always used to think, truly, I used to think this as a kid. That's a convenient excuse to stay poor. I haven't had a new pair of shoes in my entire life. Dude, that's a pretty convenient excuse to stay poor. And first of all, you have 12 kids. Like, why do you have so many kids? They just, though, all of it never added up. But it's
Yes.
crazy. And I never understood this. Those things start to layer over time, especially as a child, right?
Yes.
And if you don't address them, if you don't deal with them and unpack them and see them for what they truly are, it's just like outdated, discarded, horrible ideas. Like they
Yes.
start to become like your contextual understanding and perception of the world. And I did not know that. And so I've always had a problem with money early on in my career. Like I was paid a lot of money because I'm relatively talented at everything I do. I don't mean that to be vain. I've been
Mhm.
gifted with a few nice things. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Divine Source. And I've always been a really hard worker. And so I've always had a bit of success. And
Yeah.
financially, I was paid a lot of money to do what I thought was just menial tasks, but I couldn't hold on to money. And I was actually scared of making money because I was like, shit, I don't even know why, but I don't even know what to do with this. And so I would get it and then I would spend it really quickly. And I never
Yeah.
understood that I had this idea of like scarcity. Like I have to just like, I don't know, I can't make enough, but then I can't hold on to enough. And so anyway, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a worthiness piece in there too, because now this is biblical, but it talks about how too much is given, much is required. And so there's also this idea that there is a worthiness piece packed, I believe,
Sure.
in
Sure.
there of, oh, wait, but then what do I do? You know what
Mm.
I mean? With this. great responsibility. And so then there's this pattern sometimes that exists of getting money and then it goes away. And you're like, where did it go?
This
Um,
worthiness thing, can we talk about that for a minute?
sure.
Especially as it pertains to the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah.
My understanding of the Bible is it's more of an interpolation of how to live a life, and it's interpretive for different people.
Hmm.
But the way that it was written and changed, and this is fact, this is not
Hmm.
Devo, the Bible was rewritten and changed from its
Hmm.
original scripture, which is more of a metaphorical way to live your best life, which was
Hmm.
just like a recreation from all sorts of other scriptures that had been written before it. But it was changed so that it was like a conditional manuscript that we were beholden to someone else, the church. And if we didn't do that and do all the things, then we'd live this like pernicious life of hell, which is not
Hmm.
actually true. But I think it started to add into a lot of people's idea of like their worth and how they showed up in the world. And then epigenetically, that just carried on through generation after generation until we held this idea that we were not worthy of anything unless we were beholden to this God, so to speak.
Right.
Sorry, this is
Yeah.
a branding podcast, but we just went a little bit different
I know
directions.
we've turned it a little bit. That's okay. Yeah.
Do you agree with that or disagree with that? I'm just curious.
No, I think my understanding has been shifting and changing, quite frankly. So I'm not really sure, to be honest, is the most honest answer I can give. I do think that it seems to me that many of the stories I believe are true, but I can't get to a place where I say, but because you were born in a different country and you didn't have access to whatever, that like you're condemned. Like that
Hmm.
doesn't make sense to
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
Or because, but I think that we can take many of these things from incredibly gifted, ascended master that was here to teach us to heal and love and all of this. And we can learn these lessons and apply them in our own lives. So,
I can agree with that.
yeah.
I think no matter where you are, whether you're in India or you're in Asia or you're in the Middle East, the Bible is something that is metaphorically there for you to learn from, whether it's through
Mhm.
story, whether it's through lessons, whether it's through anecdotes, etc. I think that there's a value in it, and I wasn't saying that there wasn't. I just think that
Yeah.
I think that it was. I think the paradigm was shifted so that the only value you could get is on a conditional relationship, like domestic abuse in a way,
Yeah.
is how I viewed it.
There's actually a really interesting, it's one of my favorite little like meditation books called The Song of the Bird. Have you ever heard of it?
Mm-mm.
Song of the Bird. So there's a story in there. This is interesting. So talks about they were in the, and a lot of these little metaphors are metaphors of life, of course. And I think it was actually written by a priest. The story goes, this little story, and one of the stories was about this ashram, and there was a cat that was like really rowdy. He was a little kitten. He was jumping all over the place, and so they used to tie up the cat during service so that he wouldn't disrupt the people. And then many years later, the cat died, and then they continued to just take a cat and tie it up at service, right? Because that's what they did before, and that's what the people before them did, and that's what the people before. So that centuries later, during worship, they have a cat tied during worship. And so it's this whole idea that yes, there is sometimes this dogma that we adopt because generationally the people before us did it and the people before and the people before. And in reality, it was just because there was a rowdy cat.
Mm.
And that's the only reason they tied up the cat during service. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
I totally know what you mean, and I didn't understand that concept until the last few years. That idea that generationally, there's this. Have you heard of this concept of epigenetics? I'm assuming you have.
yes,
Like
yes,
that's how trauma gets passed on. Is we literally epigenetically take on whatever context, or for example from our parents, and then that
yes,
just keeps getting, it just literally gets passed on to your children and it gets passed on to the next generation, and
yes,
until you break that cycle it just
yes.
continues to perpetuate.
And it's one of the reasons I think that, why it's so important for us. You're not only doing the work for yourself as you understand and grow in your understanding of this, but you're actually healing your future line and your past line at the same time. It's
Yeah.
really fascinating. So, and I
Trauma.
had big stories of scarcity in my own, from my mother, from her family, from her side, from my dad's side. And so this idea, I remember her not too long ago actually talking to me, and she was judging, and she's lovely. I love her very much. But she was judging people that flew private jets. Now, that's fine. But we had this conversation and she's like, I just think that's such a waste of money for them to buy a plane. And then, but I was thinking about it and I was like, but if you really think about it, if they're a billionaire and they've got discretionary income, environment aside and whatever, right? Just from a financial perspective, what if them buying a plane is the same thing as you buying a purse, right?
Absolutely.
So it's how can we judge them for how they choose to spend their money when proportionally it could be the same or actually less than what you're choosing to spend money on. And so,
Yeah.
but it's this idea of judgment around people that have money. I had a lot of that
Mm.
growing up.
Same. That whole idea, for whatever reason, I've had the blessing of spending a lot of time in or third world countries for different types of projects, and just being able to see how much abundance I actually have versus people in Nicaragua, for example, which is where I was recently. And there's literally an entire community who's living in it's the Managua, which is the capital city. It's the
Mm,
city dump where they put everything. There's literally an entire village of 60,000 people who live in the dump, and their entire livelihood is
wow.
built around collecting other people's trash and either using it for their own purpose. Their homes are built from other people's trash, for example, like literally.
Wow.
No,
Wow.
I'll show you a video. Your mind will be blown. Or reselling it in some way, shape, or form. So your mom and her purse, there's no one in the city of Managua's trash city that has a purse. Ain't nobody have a purse there. So I
Right.
totally understand that. But these are not lessons that are taught to us as children. At least I don't know about you, but I never had a single lesson that I'm actually using today, other than my work ethic, that my father ever sat me down and had this conversation about this different way of things. And they don't teach us this in school. They didn't teach us this in college. Nobody takes the time to walk you through how life really works. Like we are
Yeah.
literally living in a program, whether you call it a real program or not a program, that we can create our entire life from. It doesn't matter what it is, you have the ability to create your own life in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. And what's interesting, as a mom, I think about I've got a 9-year old, a 7-year old, and a 5-year old. And so I think about how do I help them see this? And so because at some level, sometimes I'll talk to them about, they play sports. And so I talk to them about visualization and how everything's created twice, first in your mind and then,
I love that.
on the field or wherever you're doing. And it's interesting. I was actually just talking to my husband about this because I saw this gift idea and I'm going to do it for my kids this Christmas. But I'm going to make a little jar for them and then actually put in like affirmations and things that they can pick out and read when they're feeling a certain way. So
Love
that's
that.
because I was trying to think of how do I help them because I never experienced any of this. And so how can I'm sure I'm going to mess them up in other ways,
Hmm.
but what can I do to help them see that they have this great power within them
I have an
that
idea
they're
for you that I did
never,
for myself that you might like. You
yeah,
want it? I did
yeah.
this when I first started uncovering this, those silicone bracelets.
Oh, yeah.
I would literally write, I would order every month or so whenever I needed a sort of a new message to remind myself about. I would literally go and make a custom made silicone bracelet. I'd put a message on there and I would order that and I would wear that bracelet for however long until it really started showing up itself in different ways, whether it's like I need more discipline or I need to be more kind or whatever the things that I would literally have a custom silicone bracelet made and I would wear it. That was my thing. I just wore it.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So it really worked well for me. I don't know if it worked for your children, but it definitely worked for me.
Yeah. No, I think it would definitely work for them too. And even just to have that reminder that like you have the I don't think they're ever sometimes somebody asked me once because I was talking to them about how I've been sharing visualization and what that means. And they're like, how do you talk about it? I'm like, I just say it. And sometimes I don't know if they totally get it, but in time they will. But it's like they may not totally understand it right now, but at least it's a start
Hmm.
so that 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, they have some type, their understanding and awareness grows.
Is that your job as a parent? I'm just curious. I'm a parent. I have two teenage girls, 18 and 15. My partner has three children of her own, which by the
Mhm.
way, um, raising someone else's children has probably been my greatest life lesson so far. Like injecting yourself into someone else's life without
Hmm.
any context. I don't know if you have any, I don't know if your kids are your kids, or I don't know if you and your husband's kids are your kids.
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
don't have any, yeah,
So
that
what's your role as a parent? I'm curious.
to do the best we can to give them a good start, to help them. I think that what I hope to do for them is to help them, give them perspective on life and help them with their belief and mindset. From, I think that's my gift to them, to help them see that they have power to create impact. I've talked to them about, because I really think that my son was talking about money. He was talking about how he wants to be a soccer player, professional soccer player, because he wants to make a lot of money, wants to buy a lot of toys. I was like, okay. And I said, one of the things that it's about making money is you have to think about, how do you create a bigger impact? The bigger impact you make in the world, the more people that you serve, the more money you have the capacity to make. Because I think that's part of it. It's, if you can use, one of my prayers for them is that they figure out what their gifts are and figure out how to share them with the world so that it serves them and serves the world in an impactful way. And that's my truest prayer and intention for them, is that they see that. So I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but I think it's really to love them and to give them the best start that you know how to give them.
I think you answered it. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I
Yeah.
think what I heard you say was some of the output of your style of parenting. I always wonder what my role as a father it truly is, because I had
Mm-hmm.
such a horrible experience with my own. But I accept your answer. I think it's cool. My view is that it's to teach them to be independent of me and try to do
Mm-hmm.
that with love and kindness and patience and model for them in any way possible so that they have at least the tools, armed with the tools. And what they do with those tools are up to them, but at least arm
Yeah.
them with modeling of some capacity so that they can see the way I do it, interpret it with the tools I've given them so they can be independent enough to make the decisions on their own without needing me. Is that a way to say it?
No, I think that's exactly it. It's about giving them a good model for seeing the world from my perspective, and then they can use whatever that is to change it into
Yeah.
however they see it. I can't control that.
Yeah.
But I think to love them unconditionally and then help them, like you said, give them tools to be able to be a good human in the world. And that's a prayer that I pray with them. I say, God help. It'll be different per the kid, but right, I'll just say, God help Christian grow strong and grow in his kindness, grow in his athleticism on the field, grow in all the things that make him uniquely him, help him see the things that you've given him, help him use his gifts to really and share them with the world in a way
Yeah.
that serves him and the highest good of all. That's what I say.
We've talked a little bit about some of our values in this conversation. And when you think about you in terms of the values that you hold near and dear, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, there's a lot of crossover with that. What is at the center of who you are? What's like the value you hold dearest?
When I've done these different testing or analysis, or the different tests that you take that show you like what are your biggest values, freedom always comes up as one of the biggest for me. Like freedom of being free of thought, freedom to make choices, freedom to be who you are. So freedom is always really big for me, and allowing other people the freedom to be who they are without judgment. It doesn't mean that I'm necessarily going to agree with them, but, and maybe I won't even want to be around them, but they're free to be who they are, and I can be free to be who I am. Really, I think truth and honesty, and I guess that kind of goes into authenticity as well, and allowing people to speak their truth, and that it all gets tied into freedom in some way too. But
So
honesty and truth.
what is that line when you speak of freedom? Because you manage people, like you have people that work for you in your agency.
Hmm.
You manage children.
Hmm.
What's that fine line between autonomy but guidance in the sense that you said I don't have to be your friend or I don't have to be around you, but I don't want to judge you for your value, which is maybe diametrically opposed to mine.
Hmm.
But what's your job as a leader to enable people to still be autonomous in their freedom, but if they're not making the right decision that does is not in alignment with what you want for your business or what you want for your family, what's your role as a leader to nurture and guide them towards you said you want people to, you don't want to judge people, but at the same time, you want people to be in alignment with what your view of the world is in terms of running your business or running your family. So what's that line between managing them and guiding them into that space without restricting or inhibiting or abolishing their freedoms, if you will?
I think that just because you have the freedom to speak your truth and be who you are doesn't mean there's still boundaries that I'm going to hold within my own space or our family space. Like we have rules. I would say I'm somewhat strict, especially as it comes to like how you speak to others, how the rules of being in our family. Here are the things that we will do and will tolerate, and here's the things we will not tolerate.
Mhm.
So there's still, I'd say, having like good boundaries, and the same thing with work. Here is the operation, and I'm going to give you the freedom to, hey, if you see an idea or you bring it to me, I'd love to hear more of what you're thinking and love to see if that's something that we can operationalize. Like I'm not a micromanager, but at the end of the day, I have the final say because that's my business, right?
Mhm.
So you're giving freedom, but because at the end of the day, if it's your operation as an entrepreneur, you can only have so much when you're managing people
Mhm.
because ultimately there has to be a boundary line too. And if that doesn't work for them, they can go work for somebody else.
Mhm. So what is that boundary? What is that value? How do you allow someone to grow, evolve, expand, add value to your business, add value to your family, but at the same time still enable them to have some sort of autonomy and choice in how they decide to live their life or how they decide to show up for you as an employee? What is that value? Like, how do you manage that? As a
Mm-hmm.
leader, how do you manage that?
It's a good question. I think that there has to be clarity on where you're going, right? So I think like any good business owner, there has to be a certain like vision and a filter that you're filtering decisions by, right? To say, this is where we're headed. Does what you're doing get us closer to that or further away? And if it's further away, then that's not something we're going to pursue or do. And if it's yes, that is in alignment with the overall vision of where we want to go, of how we want to grow, of what we want to do, then yes, that's a yes. So I think it starts with having a vision or a mission statement for, of course, for your business. And actually, I've heard I was at a conference more, I guess it was a few years ago, and it was he deals in a lot of family offices. And he said that a lot of the family offices and that he worked with, and also in his own family, they had mission statements for the family, like
Hmm.
values that they actually, and he had his kids who were, I think, 7 and 9 at the time. They happened to be at the conference because it was like a financial conference they were at, and our kids were there too. And they had the place for the kids to go, and then they had a place for the parents to learn. And he had his kids there with him, and they came up during his, and he had them just recite their values, like all the family's values. There were like 10 of them. It's really fascinating that's what he was instilling in them from an early age of this is the family, this is the values that we as a family believe in. And then again, it becomes a good filter for are your choices in alignment with the values of us as a family, or are they not?
Hmm.
And if they're not, then we can't
A-
let you do that.
As you were ruminating on my question and you started to answer it, I literally wrote that down. How critical it is, whether you're a parent or a mother or a father or a CEO or an entrepreneur running a business or managing people or interacting with people or running your own business by yourself as a solopreneur. It's really critical that you have a clarity on your purpose, your vision, and your values because it's a roadmap for everything. It's a roadmap as a parent, it's a roadmap for your family, it's a roadmap as an entrepreneur. So I really echo that space. I really, no, not echo. What's the word I'm looking for? I really intimate with that. I love that you said that. So
Mhm.
how have you, as a leader, clarified, crystallized the purpose of why you're here, like what it is you want to do? You talk a lot about, there's a lot of cool words that you dropped in your bio, magic and being able to focus and having clarity and soul center and all these things. But how did you develop those? Like, how did you come to those conclusions that these are the things that matter to me? These are my purpose. These are my values. This is my vision. And this is how I'm going to live my life. How did you get to that space?
So for me personally, I honestly think my business coach helped me tremendously with helping me crystallize that. I don't think you always need that, but I think a business coach is one of the, or a coach in general, is an accelerator to
Yeah.
success. And so I mentioned her name before, Jen Cudmore. She actually has, and I can actually maybe even share with you or share with your listeners, like her branding archetypes, but she uses this kind of testing or questionnaire to fill out, and it creates your branding archetypes. So when you're thinking about personal brand, this would be really cool for you too. There's 12 archetypes that you can go into, and I'll show you. Is this video too?
Yeah.
Yep.
I
Okay.
actually do this
Yeah.
exercise with my clients.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
similar. So mine is romantic,
Hmm.
right? I literally have these laminated on my desk. And so I'm a romantic alchemist. So romantic means to deepen intimate connection. An alchemist means to make dreams come true. And so as we think about that's just at the core of who I am. And so when I show up in my business, like I purposely show up as that person. And so I use words and actually these branding archetypes, like the romantic here has words, branding words like romance, heart, desire, friendship, beauty, connection, adored, magnetism. Did I say that right? Resist, attract, elegant, deep. There's all these words, right? And so that speak to that brand. So I think part of it is knowing who you are and then developing how you show up in your business around those brand pieces because it's naturally who you are. So then as we think about authenticity and how powerful that is in terms of our connection with people, if we're showing up uniquely as the person that we are in the world by the way that we speak, by the way that we act, by the images that we use in our brand, it's going to connect then and attract in the people that you're meant to work with. Because the people that don't resonate with that frequency or those words, that messaging, maybe that it won't speak to them, but then the right people end up showing up. So you tend to attract then, I would call them soul aligned clients
Mm.
or people that you're meant to work with because they get it.
That's a really important point. I want you to clarify a little bit more because how important it is to work with the people that fill you up. Because if you're not working with the clients that are in alignment with your culture, your clarity, your purpose, and I'm not saying you all have to be like kumbaya around the campfire together type of thing, but you
Yeah.
all have to be in like the same energy spectrum in terms of what you believe in, what you think is important, what your values are, like how you view collaborations. Because if you're not, you get this imbalance in everything you do because you're just not on the same page. How important is that? And I'd like you to speak to that for a minute because you've
Yeah.
obviously gone on this journey to understand who you are. And once you really understand who you are, you're able to clearly articulate that. And once you're able to clearly articulate that, other people pick up on that transmission and are like, that's the type of person I want to do business with.
Yeah.
Can you just talk to that a little bit about how important that is for you, the lessons that you learned on the other side of that, like working with the wrong type of people, like it fucks up your entire day. So,
Right.
how important is that? And the people that are listening are mostly entrepreneurs. How important it is to really clearly understand who you are, how you show up in the world. And then when you understand that, you can match up with the vibrationally with the right type of people. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
I love talking about this. So absolutely. First, I think the whole underlying premise, I think that you have to understand is energy is everything. It really is. And so it's not just a woo thing that's talked about anymore. It's measured, it's scientific. And so if we know that energy is everything, then I think it's so important that you protect that energy too. And so the people that, and I know people listening might relate to this, it's that when you have a client that's just you don't connect with and they just drain you. Like you look at the phone and you see their name and you're like, "Oh, I cannot talk to this person one more time." Because most of the time the people like that are people that don't appreciate you. They're not appreciating your work and then you don't feel good and you're not and it just drains your energy. Contrast that with, of course, people that do appreciate you and do light you up. It's like you see them, you want to talk to them, you want to help them, you want to do more, you want to actually overgive because they really are appreciating what you're offering. So I think that again, when you're showing up as the person that you are in the world, you're more likely and you have an understanding of who you are. You also have then a filter by which you can say, okay, yeah, this is who I am. You have a filter by when you're interviewing and meeting clients, knowing who to say yes to and who to take on, and sometimes who to say no to is equally as important. With the understanding and trust, and sometimes in a business, that's scary to say, you know what, I don't think this is a good fit. Because as entrepreneurs, business owners, we're trying to make money, right? And
Yeah.
by saying no, there's this thought that if I say no, then I'm not going to make
Yeah.
enough money. But
Yeah.
that's because you're tying a client to a money outcome.
Mhm.
And I think that where I've shifted to in my business is not tying one person to my income because money actually doesn't necessarily come from a person or a thing. Money comes from the universe, money comes from God. And this is a broader concept. This is a belief that I have. And who's to say that, like, by saying no to that person, you're honoring who you are. And then all of a sudden, the next day, you pick up 10 clients because you've been very discerning in what you're willing to say yes and no to. And I think that's like a scarcity abundance thing wrapped in there too, is knowing and trusting that the right people are just going to show up. I have an intention and affirmation that I say, where I say, God, help me bring me the people that I'm meant to serve and that I'm meant to work with, and lovingly remove the ones that aren't. Because I do believe that
Can you
you
repeat
could
that?
work with, oh
Can you?
yeah, God, bring me the people that I'm meant to work with and serve, and lovingly remove the ones that aren't.
That's beautiful.
And I think that when you have the intention and trust that the right people will show up, and when you show up in the world just to really make an impact and a difference, like that's your real job, is to how can I create impact for other people? How do I serve people at a higher level? When that is your operating principle, things just show up to help support you.
The more you talk, the more oddly familiar you look to me. Have we never met before?
It's funny when I was looking you up, I was like, I wonder if we have ever met, but I don't know where it would have been, quite frankly.
The more you speak, the more I hear your voice, the more your inflections, the more I feel like I've met you somewhere, some context. All right, sorry,
Yeah.
just sorry. Back to your affirmation. Sorry. Ooh, squirrel.
No,
That's me.
that's okay. But I
Squirrel.
felt that too.
Ooh, squirrel. That's me. You got to keep me on target. All right. So anyhow, here's what I struggle with. What you just said. It's beautiful. It gave me goosebumps when you said it. I struggle believing in that sort of stuff. I understand the pragmatism of it. I understand the ideology behind it. I know that it works. I've seen the data. I've heard people like yourself talk about it on a regular basis. I myself have seen it in my own practice,
Hmm.
but I still struggle to believe in it that just saying words are going to manifest something. And it's not the fact that you're just saying it. You have to physically believe and live that space, right? It's like
Yeah,
it has to become part of your DNA in a way, correct? But I think,
exactly.
yeah, but how do you make it part of your DNA? What is it that you're doing that just becomes the ecosystem of your life?
So I think part of it is it's not just words, it's the energy behind them. And so there is a piece of it, like you said, you have to, I don't want to say fake it till you make it, but I think that if you're so far off from where that is right now, you have to try to figure out how do I get on the escalator, like going to that destination. And
Hmm.
I'm a big believer in morning routine. I
Hmm.
meditate in the morning. I journal a lot. I am a big affirmation person. In fact, I just recorded a whole podcast. My last episode was on gratitude affirmations that you can use in your business.
Mm.
And sometimes it's not as easy as saying, I am always attracting people that I'm meant to serve. Sometimes it could be like, I'm on my way to attracting people that resonate with, because it's a softer way of getting to the
Hmm.
destination, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. But there is this, I think it's a Joe Dispenza thing. My business coach and I were just talking about it, and she talks about deciding something first is true, then figuring out the beliefs around that need to happen, and then the feeling stage of it. Versus most people get into a feeling stage that then affects their beliefs, that then affects their decisions. And that's an inverted way of looking at it. This is like kind of higher level. So hope you can follow
Oh,
here.
I'm with you.
Okay. But it's like deciding something's true. So it's deciding that, you know what, I'm deciding that the right people just always show up for me. Now, what beliefs do you have to have that reinforce that decision? The beliefs are that I'm always in the right time, I'm always at the right place at the right time, that I'm always guided to where I'm meant to be, that so you start to then focus on the belief system, and then that infuses into the feeling state, which is a more confident, at trust and ease and peaceful way of feeling, right? So versus the other way around, which is how most people operate. Most people feel a feeling, then create a belief on why they're feeling what they're feeling, and then that gets influences their decisions versus the opposite way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. The fake it till you make it stuff I'm not a big fan of, as I hate inauthentic, if you will. I just
Yeah.
posted on this yesterday. I used to date this woman. I was actually engaged to be married to her, and everywhere we went was a staged scenario. No matter where we were, it was a
Mm.
staged scenario. We had to film it and record it, and then she would put it on social media, and it was like she was living this best life, and it was just always disingenuous to me, and I fucking
Yeah.
hated it. I love the idea of documenting your life so you can share that with other people, because in the process, maybe you may touch someone's life, but you should always do
Yeah.
that in a genuine capacity, never like creating these scenarios that are just complete obfuscations of the truth, right? And
No,
so,
not fabrications. I guess when I say that, what I meant was, if you're in complete debt and then you're going to say an affirmation like, I'm living debt free, that feels inauthentic. And so you're never going to believe that's true, because when you look at your bank account, you're like, that is not true. I
mhm,
am definitely not that. So you're actually, that's where affirmations can go wrong. Because if you're saying something that's just so far from where you are. So when I say fake it till you make it, what I mean is you have to just find a softer way to get yourself into that believing state.
mhm,
So instead, you could say, I'm on my way to being a better steward of money.
mhm,
And I'm on my way. I'm always learning new things that are helping me see money differently.
mhm.
I am, so you're not just being false with yourself, I guess is
Yeah, I
the
understand what you're saying.
yeah.
My parallel that I would make to that is the habits book. Instead of
Hmm.
setting these ridiculous, audacious goals, which are great to have goals, but you look at them, they're all the way up here, and how the fuck am I going to get up there? So instead, establishing these habits, incremental habits, that along the way you suddenly shorten that gap between this big goal. And in the process of setting up all these habits, not only have you shortened that distance, but you've also become like this completely different person, because you've started creating all the different things that actually will get you to that goal at some point, right? So
Yeah.
same concept. And I do appreciate it. I wasn't accusing you of being inauthentic.
No, no. I just wanted to explain more of what I meant. And I think to your point, if you're deciding, I think you're right. If you're deciding, I want to be a make $5 million this year, whatever it is, right? If you want to, or something bigger, whatever that big goal is, you can still decide that could be true for you, but don't necessarily put a time limit on it. And
Yes.
also, I think it's more just like filtering, what would that person do? If I was that person that was doing this, would I be scrolling social media when I first wake up in the morning? Would I be? Maybe
Hmm.
not.
Hmm.
So, what would that person do? The goal itself is, I think, good to have, but it may not happen in 2 months. It may not happen a year, but you're deciding that you're going to be that person. And to your point, what incremental actions can I add or will get me closer to that goal?
Mm.
And starting from that place.
I like that. So if you want to make $5 million in revenue, you need to fill in like a Mad Lib all the different things between where you are now and where you want to be. and use those as your smaller micro goals, if you will, or habits that you'll establish. So if I want to be a 5 million a year revenue, what are the things that I have to do before that space arrives to get there? So
Yeah.
obviously maybe I need to hire somebody. I need to hire a virtual admin. Maybe I need to have clarity on my purpose. What is my true purpose? Or clarity on my superpowers? What's my gift to the world? All the little things in between. Maybe I need to wake up every morning and get off my fat ass and start working out. Like that's going to help me out a little bit, right? So people
Right.
like, yeah, so I hear what you're saying. And I totally appreciate that.
Yeah.
One of the things you've talked about, sorry, and I've heard you say this, and maybe you haven't talked about it, maybe I just read it somewhere or I've just inferred it, is this idea of using intuition.
Mhm.
And it sounds like it's like a big part of your life. In terms of connecting the dots, I think is what I read of something where that you put in your bio. Is like, you're really good at connecting the dots for people, and people are always surprised. It's like, how did you see that? And it's because you use your intuition around it, which is like you're trusting your gut on things. How did you develop that? How did you realize that was an inherent part of what you're utilizing in your ecosystem of your life?
I don't know that it was like one thing, but I think that intuition as a whole, I think that all of us are incredibly intuitive.
Hmm.
Children are incredibly intuitive. And over time, what happens is we're
I
told
didn't
we're
mean to
wrong.
flip you off, by the way, when I was fixing my glasses.
Okay,
Sorry, I just realized I flipped you off. Sorry, I wasn't flipping you
I
off.
didn't
That
even,
was that was not a
you're
Freudian
good.
slip.
You're good. You're good. But so intuition, I think, is a
Wait, go
learned.
back because I interrupted you on the children. Children are intuitive, then I interrupted you and flipped you off. Continue that.
Yeah, no, you're good. So, yes, as children, I think we're born intuitive. We're born with this heightened intuition. And then we're conditioned from our parents, from teachers, from grown-ups that we perceive to be wiser than us, that we're wrong for feeling the way that we feel, for thinking the way that we feel, or whatever. And then we sometimes can lose this skill. And I think that all of us have the ability to, because I think when people hear the word intuition, they sometimes think, oh, psychic, right? Like it's like a psychic person or somebody that can see the future or whatever.
It is though.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that just like people are born with gifted athleticism, for example, there are some people that are born with gifted levels of intuition, but that doesn't mean that anybody can't throw a ball or learn how to understand or interpret the messages that we receive. So I think that as grown-ups, I think a lot of us have been conditioned to lose this skill, and I think all of us can get it back. And I think that it's actually part of our journey to understand it and to get it back.
Mm.
And I think that as business owners, our power to create impact, our power to create really awesome outcomes for our clients, a lot of that can be done through intuition because we can be guided. And we don't, when I talk about intuition, what I mean by it is the guidance that we have the ability to receive. And I think that can show up as a lot of times people may think, oh, is it like a voice that shows up or is it a feeling or what is it? I think it's part of it is it's your own journey to understand what that feels like for you. For most people, I don't think it's like a voice that's talking to you. For most people, I think that it's a gut feeling of some sort or just something that like drops in. It could be a thought that sort of drops in and you're like, huh, I wonder what that's about. And it could be something like, and I'll give an example. So let's just say you're thinking about your business and you're like, gosh, I really need to find a new CPA. I don't know. I feel like I'm just not, I need to find a new CPA. Okay. So you have this conversation or you have this thought, and then you say, I need to do this. And then a few hours go by and you get a, a hit to go to a coffee shop, right? Oh, I need some coffee. But then for some reason, you get another hit that says, for some reason I'm being drawn to this place to go to. I don't really know why, but I'm going to trust that because normally I go here, but for some reason I just want to go here, right? Or I'm being guided in some way or this feeling. And so you go there and then you're in line and all of a sudden person behind you is a friend that you haven't seen in forever. And then you all start talking, and they bring up that there is this amazing CPA that they just met with, and you've got to talk to them. You don't, it's like this intersection of there are so many things interwoven in our like universe. We're so intimately connected with all the people around us that sometimes it can be as simple as when you're more in tune, I believe, with your own intuition, with the own connectedness with the people around you, these sort of seemingly coincidences, which you could label it a coincidence, or you could label it that I'm that powerful to manifest what I need and want in every moment. And I believe the latter.
Along those lines, I read something somewhere, heard something similar that if you can actually think it, then it's already happened, and you're just actually remembering it. And so it's our job to remember who we really truly are, and it's these interconnected species where we're not singular. We are really, literally, every single one of us comes from the same DNA. If you just want to go back that far, right? Let's just talk about it from a pragmatic perspective. But we are literally all interconnected in one way, shape, or form. And what we do to someone will have some sort of a ripple either on someone else or the environment or whatever else. There's always like this interconnected play going on. And remembering that space about ourselves is phenomenal, which kind of lends itself into this idea of faking it till you make it or manifesting it. Is like if you had the idea about something, whatever it is, then it's probably already happened in some way, shape, or form, and you're just remembering how to step into that. And it's
Yeah.
like mind-boggling to think about that we've already lived it, which is really doesn't make any sense. But then the fact that you're like, maybe we have lived it because this is not our first time we've done this sort of this
Yeah.
dance, so to speak.
And speaking to that, even is that, and to your point, I think when you get an idea, it's coming into your field of awareness because it's possible
Mhm.
in some way, right?
Yeah.
So if you have the awareness of it, the thought of it, the
Mhm.
fact that you're receiving that means that it's possible. Now,
Mhm.
what you do with the information, that's where the power of choice comes in because we're freedom beings. We can choose as we want. But the fact that we're getting some type of inspiration, thought, means that it is a possible scenario. And then it's just what you do with the information. How are you going to act on the information you're receiving?
The idea of choosing and the idea of choice is probably been one of my most lived mantras that I'm trying to really embody over the last few years, which is we always have a choice in how we respond to everything. People can say or do whatever they want to you. I get to choose how I respond. And if I respond negatively, or I can respond positively, or I can choose to walk away, or I can choose to engage in the road rage with you, whatever it is. But we always have that, we do always have that choice. And that is what the underlying premise of what freedom is. It's the ability to make that choice. I do choose to participate in this proclivity, this activity, whatever it is.
Yes.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it? If
Yeah,
you,
I say
if,
that to my kids too. I'll say,
yeah,
you're choosing right now to be upset. You're choosing to be sad right now. So, and again, they may not understand what that means at this moment. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit sometimes. But then hearing that, like you're choosing right now how to feel and how to act, and you can make a different choice. You don't have to
mm.
choose this for yourself.
And that sometimes is difficult because you get stuck. We are our own worst enemies sometimes. We get caught in our own bullshit and our own drama, and we sort of these voices in our head and this narrative that we tell ourselves. So it is really important to understand that you can break free from that. You might need some help. You said something earlier about having a coach, and it sounds like you've had one for a while. And you said something to the effect of, I don't know if it's necessary for everybody. I do think it's necessary for everybody, actually. I think everybody should have some sort of a accountability partner or a coach or somebody who they can, and not their romantic partner or whatever, just somebody that they can utilize for whether it's a sounding board, whether it's inspiration, whether it's like just to be held accountable for yourself. And I didn't understand that until I guess I've been working with a coach now for 5 years. Yeah, 5 years. Wow. And since I started doing that, I've seen some of the single most prolific gains in my life happened
Mhm.
when I started really focusing on working on myself as opposed to trying to blame everybody else for the problems. Hiring a
Yes.
coach, going to see therapy on a regular basis. I didn't realize how much bullshit I've been holding on to since I was a kid. It's crazy, man. You're like, what? I've been
Like
living
what?
with that for 40 years. What the fuck?
Yeah.
You
It's
know?
no wonder I've been walking in this program. Like I've been
Yeah. I really started diving into this whole idea of unpacking your shadow work and
Mm,
understanding how your shadows show up, but also the benefit of your shadows. There are benefits to it, if nothing else, just having the self-awareness around them. And then what
yeah.
happens when you're able to recognize those shadows and the things that are holding you back or the things that are affecting how people view you, you're able to step into your own powers because then you can work on them. And in the process of unpacking your bullshit, you start to realize, hey, I'm actually good at this. I really like doing that. So it's really cool. And I always ask this question to people just in random conversations is if you had one gift, and you have many, but if you have one gift that you think would make the biggest impact to the world, and I told you today, hey, the mothership is here. It's time to go home, Kara. You have to give that gift to humanity. What is that gift you would give to people?
Oh gosh.
And apparently the motherships are here. I guess there's ships flying all over New Jersey right now. I was
Apparently, I
like, what?
know.
I don't think they've ever
You
left
know,
personally between you and me. I think they've been here since the beginning of time. I think we are the ones that were like the transients.
yeah, I could get on board with that. I think that the gift that is the gift of connection, of really like giving people, of connecting with people so that they feel like seen and heard. And I think that there needs to be more of that in the world, of showing up for people and really see and helping give them a space to be seen, heard, and helping them see beyond the insular nature of like where they're living right now, helping them see something bigger for themselves. Because I think that all of us are
Mm.
uniquely powerful creators. And I really, my intention is to continue to spread that message so that people feel that and know that they are not alone, that
Mm.
we are all deeply connected, and that they are choosing their reality right now and they can choose differently.
I love that. What can someone do if they don't have that gift from you and they just heard you say this? What's something they can do today when they get off this podcast that they can put into their life today to more embody this idea of connectivity? What's something they can do right now?
I guess this sounds, it is self-promotional, but in a way, I really do believe. So I've got a lot of podcasts on or episodes on the Soul Inspiring Business podcast. And you can start listening to that. You'll, if you've liked what you've heard, you'll hear more of that. You can, many of the books that I mentioned earlier and the people that you could pick up any one of their books, Wayne Dyer, many of the people that we've dropped throughout this show, and start on that journey. Start thinking about more clearly with awareness, like where am I right now? Is this really where I want to be? And if not, what do I see? What's my bigger vision? If I could just, like, if anything was possible, what would I want life to look like for me? Not only in business, but in life. Like, how do I want to walk through the world? How do I want to be in conversation with people? Like, really understand and get a feeling or sense of what do you actually want life to look like? Because it could be very different. Like the life that I want for myself might be different than the way that you want to live. And that's okay. You just have to go deep into understanding what would feel amazing to you.
Mm.
And I think it really starts with that because I think a lot of times when I've coached people in the past and asked, what do you really want? Where do you, people can't answer that question because they haven't spent enough time really understanding what it is. They operate on autopilot. And when you operate on autopilot, then things you're consciously creating or you're unconsciously creating,
Mhm.
right? So if you're always creating, it's just, are you creating more of what you want or what you don't want?
Mm.
And so the onus, I think, is on you to say, what do I actually want? What do I want to consciously choose into? And maybe as we go into 2025, what does life look like? And what decisions or actions do I need to make now in order to be that version of myself that I want to vibe into?
Mm. I don't know how old you are, but you're somewhere in the middle of your life, I would imagine. When you look back at your life at the end of this, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be, even if it's just remembering like what you've accomplished and what you've done, what's the legacy, if you will, when you look back and you're like, this is how I am going out, and I feel pretty good about that. What's that look like?
And I want to be remembered as somebody that was kind, that really helped make an impact in other people's lives, that helped them see things differently for themselves. One of the things that I just yesterday, I got a message from a family friend of mine. I've known her. She's known me my whole life. And I guess she listened to the podcast and the most recent one on affirmations. And she's not somebody I would say that by nature has been the most positive like person. Lovely, but like by nature wasn't wired that way. And she wrote me this beautiful message that was like, I listen to this and I look at things differently in the world. I actually, even though the affirmations were on business and that's not where I am in life right now, just like listening to that gave me hope. I want
Mm.
to help people see hope for themselves and that they can really choose what they want.
Hmm. I like that your legacy is one of servitude in a sense, as opposed to self-promotion, if you will. Interesting.
That's why we're here, right? Is to like the book The Go-Giver. You
Hmm.
ever read that?
Hmm.
Yeah. I think that's the law of it is a book on business, but it's the idea that the more we give, the more we receive. And the more people that we impact, the more so it's all reciprocal.
As long
But
as we
like
don't have that expectation going in, though.
correct. You're going in, and I think that's where I started to talk about it earlier, was like I think like it's trippy, and this is like a trippy concept a little bit, but like when we think of our clients as the money coming in, we can't think of clients as the money coming in, even though that is a natural way to receive money. We have to think of it as like, how can I serve in my business? How is my business serving the world? How is it serving my clients in a really high way? And then naturally, money just flows, but they are separate
Mm.
because a lot of times, especially in sales, we tie a person to a money outcome. And I think people feel that when that's how you operate, right?
Mm.
And then you're maybe not making the best, giving the best advice because you've tied this person to a money outcome.
Mm.
So it's like, how can we actually step away from that, make the money goal separate and knowing that that's separate from the client. It's a trippy idea, but if we can actually approach our business from that way, I think that you'll find that things and opportunities will unfold in even bigger ways because we're giving space to the fact that money can come in from anywhere.
Yeah. I love that. I actually learned that concept from another coach many years ago from a book I read. And one of the things I do in that vein, I actually give away a free coaching call. And it's generally with no strings attached. I just want to share my perspective of the world. And that's what I do. So I love that you said that. I had a meeting with someone who I gave this coaching call to recently, and she was blown away that I was doing this with her, and she couldn't understand why I was giving it away for free. And I was just like, it's just what I do. It's my philosophy. It's one of my gifts. I'm a giver. You talked about your brand archetypes. Like one of mine is like in that idea of mentorship. Like
Mm,
I view myself as a coach and a mentor, like I always have. But
yeah.
anyhow, where I was going with that is she gave me this thing at the end of the call, and she said, one of the things I'd like you to consider is when you're giving away these things, it's a tithe, like you're giving a tithe back to the universe. And
Mm,
so she
love
said,
that.
yeah. So she gave me this incantation that she thinks that I should read every time I give something away to somebody in terms of like selflessly giving it away. And I struggled with it at first. So the whole idea of tithing and like this, the church says you should tithe 10% of your revenue. I always never really understood that
Mm.
because they use it for whatever reasons that they use it for. So the whole idea of like,
Right.
yeah, so the whole idea of tithing has always rubbed me the wrong way, but she reframed it for me. And so I'd like to read this to you. I just want to share. I
Yeah.
think it's really fantastic. She said, so this is, and I reworked it a little bit for my own purposes, but she said, this is, I'm paraphrasing, bless this service that I'm giving with good fortune and health and wellness for those in need or those in receipt of this gift that I'm giving them. May the good fortune in this donation come back to me in the form of a kinder. So you replace that, may it come back to me in the form of, and then you put your own statement in there.
Yep.
After you say this donation, it must leave your hands within 24 hours by releasing it. And so you see, I hereby release my gift to the universe with gratitude. And so it's like, whenever you do something for somebody out of the kindness of your own heart, you should tithe
Yeah,
that back out and let the universe know that you're tithing it. So it's sort of like your affirmations that you do and the sort of this idea of living and embodying the things that you believe in.
I
I just thought
love
it was
that.
really powerful. Yeah, I thought it was really powerful too.
Love that so much. Yeah.
Wow, we've
Um,
talked a lot about a lot of things on this call. I don't know that we talked a lot about branding in the sense of like pragmatic ideas, but a lot of the stuff that you've
Right.
shared and a lot of the stuff we've discussed, again, they go back to that integration of your personal ethos rubs off and manifests itself in your professional business. And so it's really important to understand who you are and have clarity around that and then live that every single moment. And so
Yeah.
I love all your insights. So I really appreciate you. Thank you for coming on the show and being
It's
candid
really
and
been a pleasure.
yeah,
I
and
don't
here,
get to often talk, like, this is really fun for me to, because I wasn't sure what to expect. I think we've talked a lot about different topics, but it really does, as you said, like tie back to brand and like personal brand.
Mhm.
And how are you a living expression in your business? And we are not like a singular being, we are multidimensional. And again, what could be more aligned spiritually than having your business as part of that and all being one and having this kind of authentic way of showing up in your business? So, anyway, I really appreciate it. It's been a really fun conversation
Thank
to
you.
explore.
Thank you. The whole point of my podcast, there's several points of my podcast. I realized many years ago that I wasn't surrounding myself with the right type of individuals that I needed in my life for me to expand in terms of my friend network, in terms of I was hiring the wrong type of people. I was working with the wrong type of people, and I didn't really have a lot of clarity on what I actually wanted for my life. And then you're way more evolved than me, and you figured this out considerably sooner than I did. But one of the things that I found to be phenomenal was this idea of a podcast where I could bring people like yourself on and just have real conversations with them as opposed to a contrived checklist of things that I have to go down the list on, but just
Yeah.
having meaningful conversations. And in the process of having this conversation, I have built this network of really deep and meaningful relationships with myself in terms of
Mm.
being able to connect other people, being able to build business ideas, masterminds. And since the podcast began, which is now I'm in my fifth year, I've launched two separate masterminds. Almost every single person in these groups came from the podcasts. I'm building a retreat, my first ever retreat next October.
Amazing.
Yeah, like there's so many different things. And so the podcast for me is a vessel where I get to have meaningful conversations with real, and not every conversation is as deep as this. Sometimes I'm like Snorburger, but I still get something out of it. No offense to anybody hearing that. Just not everyone is as interesting as you. So, and that's just the nature of the beast. And maybe I'm
Yeah.
not interesting to them. And that's just like that energy bounce off, which goes back to the original point. Understand who you are and what you do and why you do it and what is your gift. And then how can you go connect with people that also appreciate that you can add value to them and they to you. So
Yeah.
all of it does come full circle. So anyway, my long-winded way of saying thank you for showing up and being real with me today. I appreciate that.
Oh, I appreciate you. This has been so fun, and I appreciate the opportunity to connect with your listeners too. So thank you.
Cool, cool. So you've got a lot of different things going on. I'd love for people to be able to connect with you. We'll put those in the show notes. What's the best way for people to find you? You have a podcast, you've got a real estate business. It sounds like you're doing some coaching now. Tell me the best way for people to connect with you.
Yeah, awesome. So at Kara Chafin Donofrio, that is the best way on Instagram, probably is the easiest way to connect with me. It's KaraChaffin and Donofrio. So that's probably a mouthful. So if you've got the links, that'll be great.
They'll be in the show notes.
Yeah,
And
perfect.
you're
And
going to
then
change
I
it
do
going
have
forward to the KCD on Instagram, no?
that actually.
There's your new brand,
There's the new
the
one. Yeah.
KCD.
The KCD. I also have at the KCD team, which is the real estate business. If you want to learn more about, we serve the DC metro area and Annapolis. And then the podcast is the Soul Inspiring Business Podcast, of which maybe you'll be a host on. I'd love, or a guest on. I'd love to host you. And yeah, so that those are the easiest ways. I also have now, it's a little old and I am in the middle of updating it. But if you want some of my favorite affirmations and just like some prompts for some journaling and things like that, you can go to free gift from Kara. That's KARA.com. And you can download a little journal that I made. So to help get you started with some of my favorite affirmations in business and personally that I love and use.
That's phenomenal. And because you said that, I've actually just finished my first draft of a journal and I'm going to send it to you as a gift. And it's only because I want feedback on how to improve it. Would you be open to that?
Totally. Yeah.
Bam. Okay, cool.
Love it.
So, wow, there's lots of things going on, Kara. I really appreciate that. So, I'll put all this in the show notes. I would like to personally invite you as a sort of shameless plug for anybody else who might be interested. I mentioned I launched a mastermind group. I launched my second mastermind group. We're now in our fourth month coming up here. December 18th is our next gathering. It's a
Oh,
virtual mastermind gathering. We had 22 people on the call last session, and I'll send you some information on it via
sure.
email. But this goes for you and anybody else in your network. If you are looking for a pretty unique model, we do breakout rooms. You get to go in a breakout room one on one with someone else in the call. You get to learn about them. We solve business problems that everybody faces at entrepreneurs. And we have all sorts of really cool little collaborations that are going on in the 60 to 90 minutes that we meet. And then you go about your way and you may have made a really cool new connection that way. So
Love that. Very
you are,
cool.
yeah, so you are personally invited to it. It's by
Thank you.
invitation only. And you'll get an email from me on this after the podcast. And if you feel like there's somebody else that you would like to invite to it, please bring. I challenge everybody every week to bring somebody with you to the meeting to register, or you have to register, but bring them to the mastermind. And so far, I've gotten some really positive feedback from the group, and I just want to continue growing it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. That would be an honor. So I appreciate the invite. And yeah, thank you.
All right, lovely. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just put us on pause, and then I'll do all the recap stuff afterwards. That way you don't have to sit through it. But thank you. I really appreciate the refreshing conversation you gave us today.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
I love podcasting for shows just like that. So, Kara, thank you. I really appreciate this refreshing breath of fresh air that we discussed today. And your journey into a soul centered perspective has been really inspiring. And I know a lot of our listeners are going to really benefit from that. Anyhow, we've talked about your story, your origin story, your view on life, your philosophies, your values. We talked about parenting. We talked about branding. We talked about aliens and supernovas. We literally talked about everything. So I really, really just appreciate you showing up and being real with me. For anybody who would like to connect with, her show notes are below, but she also has a really cool soul inspiring business podcast. You can check that out. It's called Soul Inspiring Business. And then she has as you heard her mention, she has this journal that she's offering, which is free gift from Kara.com. And I'm going to check that out because I haven't seen it yet and would love to just check it out and see what value it brings. Anyway, if you've been listening and thinking, I have a story like this that I would love to share, or maybe you have a friend or a coach or a colleague that really has a fantastic story that would make a great guest on the branding laboratory, please send me a DM. Please drop me an email. Please just refer them to me. The whole point of this is to spread the knowledge, spread the wealth, and spread the connectivity of all of us as humans so that we can in turn provide our gift to the world. And we can do that by connecting with other like-minded people who appreciate what we do and what we are. And so being just make the world a grander, broader, kinder, more respectful place. And we certainly need a lot of that right now. Shameless plug, if you are a purpose-driven leader like Kara and you want to clarify your vision and you want to build a brand that resonates deeply with your audience, or maybe you don't know who your audience yet is, or maybe you're trying to build something around your superpowers, let me please introduce you to my custom tailored brand discovery process. It's a transformational approach that combines spirituality, which you heard us talk about today, science, psychology, and strategy to really align your personal values with your professional goals. And you can learn more about that on my website, thebrandstoryteller.com. I have a coaching program that's going to be starting up here in January. It's going to be a group coaching program that will graduate into a mastermind. It's going to be a phenomenal process, and the people that you're going to connect with through this process could be game changers for your life. Who knows? So anyway, until next time, I'm Deevo, reminding you that who you are is how you lead, and how you lead is how you grow. Thank you for joining us on the Branding Laboratory. I will see you on the next episode.